What do you know about Lake Etna? And you said it was named after somebody.
Oh, a friend of mine, a lady who lived in the neighborhood, Edna Lawler, and apparently she knew either the engineer or one of the principals that built the original lake with the wood dam.
Mm-hmm.
And, excuse me, that's all I know. We knew it Lake Edna, and we could still see the high water line of Lake Edna,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess we will for years to come. And then there was another lake. There were two more. There was Waterhouse, which people hike to, and that's good fishing. And you reach that from the top of the gorge and walk down the rocks to it. Not very far down, but down. And then there's a third lake called Big Dam, which my dad and friend took me to 100 years ago, at least 70 years ago. And Big Dam was the highest one of the Waterhouse and of Edna, and that was, they were built by the miners to run the flumes, which went all the way down the Stanislaus to Sonora and Columbia to sluice for gold. So those flumes have been, I believe, converted to carrying drinking water now. But they're still the same old flumes. So you could follow it. There's a trail of use next to them, and you could walk all the way to Sonora if you want.
Right, yeah. I've seen some of those things.
So, anyway, that's about all I remember of the old structures up that high, most of which, the exception being Waterhouse, being more a natural lake. There was an old guy, Fred Layton was his name, a cowman, and lived in Sonora, ran cows, and as was the tradition, he would run his animals summertime, take them up. In the old days, he used to drive them. That was great fun because I had a horse and I could go along. It was fun. He would drive them up to, say, Bell Meadow, and then set them out to graze for the summer season. And that lasted till just past Labor Day. And then they gathered them up and bring them home, almost all of them. And I had a horse which my dad very wisely rented from Sanguinetti. Then he said, because he said, daughter, you can't keep a horse under your bed in San Francisco. So it was my horse to use. Nobody else could use it. And it worked just fine, pretending it's mine. And then give it back at the end of the season. We'd start all over again the next year. It was wonderful. And as a kid, I rode, when I think now, the fussy mamas, oh, my daughters can't do this or they can't do, they're afraid of that. My Lord, I would tell my parents where I was going, and they'd take note. And then I was free to go into the backcountry with Blackjack. That was his name. And great big 17-hand high horse, and I'm 5'3", or was. And so I always had to get a a stump
Right, get up.
or a rock to climb on to get on him because he was way up there. He was pretty good about waiting for me. But if I got my foot in the stirrup, that was good enough. We're off, you know. So we rode all over the backcountry, way back behind Meadow Dam, behind Granite Lake, down to the old trail, which led from Meadow Valley to Bear Lake. Mm-hmm. You could go down that back way, which was not well known in those days. And those were hunter and fishermen, lakes, and very popular. But of course, the visitor load was so much less. Anyway, those were the days. I'd ride all day, come home. A few times I was late. I'd come home at dusk and have to canter by the house, so my dad would come and pick me up in the car. I put the horse away, and I remember one time I was really late, dusk, and I rode by and waved, and I'll be there, I'll be there. Dad got in the car, brought me home. I was exhausted. I had been caught up on the granite rocks, very steep ones, in the Upper Meadow Canyon. The canyon's relatively flat, but it goes down and follows the stream and winds up at Bear Lake. And so it gets steeper. And as I recall, it got steep enough that I was loath to ride my horse down astride. So I put a rope around his neck and walked down to one of the boss joints. Those are the cracks in the granite that you can get a foothold. Otherwise, geez, that was slick. And he'd come very nervously with the iron shoes making sparks from the granite as he slid to the next boss joint. He didn't like it either. But then he gathered himself there and okay, now where? Well, I'd find another one. We'd go to that one down there. And we worked our way down the canyon, and as a result, we were probably several hours late getting home, galloped all the way. And that's from Meadow Dam all the way to Pinecrest, because they didn't have the interim ranger station at Aspen. So I was one tired dude. So my dad picked me up, horse was fed, watered, and so forth, and I went in and had a shower, ate a little supper, and went to bed. Bang. And I can remember hearing my mother and dad talk while washing dishes. And Mother said something like, "But George, what if she fall off in one of these things?" And my dad said very matter-of-factly, but not unkindly, "Well, she'll have to walk home." And I'm lying there getting ready to go to sleep, and I thought, in cowboy boots? No way. And that marks a truism I used thereafter, asking myself, what if, in all my excursions on hiking and climbing and all that sort of stuff, it works for flying too. What if? And if you don't like one of the answers, then maybe you don't do it, or you take an awful risk. It was a remarkable experience that I had, and I don't think any other young woman who was my age then, 11, 12, waltzing off into the backwoods. But I was very comfortable with the backwoods. I loved maps. I made maps. That became my profession. And I always knew where I was. I might be misplaced, but I was never lost. And misplaced might mean one stream over. I didn't quite get all far enough, you know, but I knew where I was and I could get out. So today, with all the GPS and all the fancy stuff, I readily admit that I'm a snob, a retro snob, that if you took away all their toys, they couldn't find their backside with both hands. And why? Because the old stuff works, and you can have the new stuff too. It makes it easier, especially if you got it all coordinated with your maps and all this fancy stuff. But if you're going to make it that easy, why go out at all? You know, I don't quite understand the experience they're looking for. Well, when it was empty, it was wonderful. We used to have boat races. These, I don't know what you call them, big
Oh, sailboats?
big outdoor Evinrude on a little itty bitty flat
Oh, right.
ship.
Sort of like the,
And they go like hell.
yeah, one of those kind of the speedboat kind of things.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And that was 4th of July. We had speedboat races, and they had kids races for rowing or something like that, all kinds of stuff. And it was much more, Pinecrest existed for people to enjoy as Pinecrest, unadorned with modern entertainment. And the danger I feel that we have today is everything has to be, well, let's put it this way, monetized. Okay, monetized. Nothing wrong with that, except that you lose some of the simplicity of the lake. We have too many people there, and the Forest Service seems helpless in seeing it. They have caveats. They have too many people. There's only so many boats on the lake. There's only so many this on the lake. Why the hell can't they fix it so there's only so many people in the area? Which boils down to that uncomfortable thought, what if there's a fire in a popular area with, 10,000 people at times?
Yeah.
One way in, one way out, and all you need is a busy Sunday with a lot of folks and having a wonderful time, and the fire starts in the wrong place, like somewhere in town.
Or just down the highway or something.
Or yeah, it doesn't have to be much. And you've got 10,000 people running for their kids, their car keys, and they're going to drive out? Give me a break. I've already told my guests that I have, if there's ever a fire in town during the weekend, forget it. Go to the lake. Go out to the boat. If you've got the keys, take the boat, float out there somewhere, and stay at the far end, as far away as you can. You could do nothing else to save yourself. And as it was, or it would be quite an experience. You'd be sitting in the middle of a lake, in the middle of a wildfire, that probably are burning up people around you. I don't understand why the Forest Service doesn't consider that. They don't, because they are a public agency, part of the Department of Agriculture, and their job is to provide recreation for the public. Nothing wrong with that, except the public has gotten too big. And now what do? And I don't think anybody has a good idea. So I had the best of it. Believe me, my girlfriends and I had the best of it. Boyfriends on the beach and riding the nose of speedboats around because nobody was was making sure that wasn't done. Although there are rules about it, but they were overlooked mostly. And we have such a confluence of usage. We have the people who love Pinecrest the way it was, usually cabin owners and campers, some really long-time campers that come back and back and back and back. It's wonderful. And then we have, those folks are the old campers, old style. And then we have the newbies that bring every bell and whistle they own with them. They all, if they're a family, the kids usually have their own cars, and those cars usually are carrying boats of some kind, a sailboat or something like that. Nothing wrong with it, except there's so many of them now. And it fills the lake. If you don't have a boat, you could rent one, but only so many. That's a limit the Forest Service has put on the rental. Only so many rental boats. So, and then you have the folks that come up to party. They could party anywhere, but the lake is lovely and it's cool and when it's hot in the summer. And they've got the beach if they can get on it. And they got this, that, and the other thing. And they're there to whoop-de-doo and have a good time. Nothing wrong with that either, except last year I had to ask permission to step on some towels to walk from the top of the beach to the water. There was no place to walk to the water. And when I got to the water, there were ladies. The newest thing is to have a floating chair with your beer. Well, I like beer. I'd have one too. But they float with their remainder ends in the water to stay cool, drinking their beer, and blocking it from anybody walking in. Even the kids can't play very well. Or better yet, the mothers have their kids playing around them, which they enjoyed, which changes the whole dynamic of how the lake is used. And here we are. What is the Forest Service going to do? Damned if I know. But I don't have to be here to watch it, that's for sure. So, and probably won't. But a lot of people are going to have a lot of fun in the lake. But I think it has to have a committee or some kind of de facto officialdom to arrive at a way to redesign the pleasure that people come to Pinecrest. And I would heartily vote for the original simple lake because A, it'll hold more people. You'll have less crap running around. I mean, there are days out there where the sailboat's worth your life, and a motorboat going right through it, probably mine. But it can't stay the way it is. It has to be redesigned for more sustainable use and pleasure. Whomever wants to step up and do it, I'm all for it. The first time I what?
That you went to Pinecrest?
So how old were you when you started?
3 months.
3 months. Okay, that's about. I went up when I was about 3 months.
Yeah, I don't remember that part.
Okay, but, so when do you actually start remembering?
Oh, I probably remember going to the lake and playing with buckets and things. I must have been 2, something like that. I had 2 older brothers. And while they had jobs, they were available on weekends and things, and they were enough older than I, 11 to 12 years, that they were trainers rather than teasers. So I learned how to paddle, I learned how to row a boat, I learned how to run a motor, I learned how to do all the things that girls those days didn't do. I could even get the water witch going, which my father used another verb for, to call it, because it was a touchy motor. and I went all over the lake by myself. And the lake was, early on the lake, I've seen photographs. I have albums of the lake early on. And in those days, when they cut the timber, just to get the timber, they left the stumps. So the lake was a snaggletooth pile of stumps that you could really bend your toe on or run into swimming. We had more services back in the 40s and 50s than we do now, that's for sure. And that was nice because it gave people a focus. And they didn't go sailing out into the deeper waters of the lake, what with boats and whatnot, although there weren't nearly as many as there are now. And that was good. Then we had the hotel beach. That was a separate one. And I think Permatease really rigged up a bunch of log booms that defined that area so it was contained and people could swim there and feel safe. And it was just as well, but there wasn't the volume of boating activity then as there is today, which I throw in a little sidebar that whoever designed the marina with the coming and going of rental boats and the launching of personal boats, all in the same area next to the swim area, that is insane. I was a swim teacher for 25 years, and I mean, this is ridiculous, but there are a lot of ridiculous things in the world. We find out later. But we've been inordinately lucky that, knock on wood, that we haven't had more catastrophes. We've had, if I remember correctly and not accurately, several young men, maybe a girl or two, jumping off the big rocks and not quite hitting the water. And those deaths were a mess and unfortunate. And then the Permatease blew up the rocks they were jumping off of. So the kids figured out some more rocks over another area. So it isn't over yet. We've had a couple of nasty boating accidents, collisions. Not many, considering the volume of activity. Not much at all. And we've had one or two spare drownings. When I say spare, single party. I was the swimming instructor for XYZ, de facto lifeguard, although I never advertised that. But the one day I took off in July was the one day a young boy drowned on Hotel Beach. And he apparently went down silently, and nobody noticed till some boys swimming with their eyes open saw him laying on the bottom and went after him and brought him up. They did all the appropriate things, but could not revive him. And it turned out it would have been moot anyway, because he didn't want to leave his money on the beach, so he carried it in his mouth, and he strangled on a dime. Wouldn't matter, you know. It's just one of those oddball things. We had a couple girls up for winter, went walking on the ice and went through, and I believe they drowned. Nobody could get to them fast enough. And we haven't had any trouble since that I'm aware of. So people are more cognizant of the dangers. You are in the mountains after all, you know. So when the big winds, the Mona winds came up, we ran for our boats.
Or go out sailing or something, or go up.
Yeah, you know, sailing or boating, you know. Oh, wow. And sitting on the front, hanging on like a steer on the back of a steer, so not to get knocked off. You know, we did some kind of what is considered today dumb things, but you have to hold the population down some way or other. So anyhow, that's not quite the way to do it. And the Mona winds we used to have are far and away more vigorous than we have now. Far and away. I came down one morning, 2 a.m., I could hear the wind roaring. It was Labor Day, or just after Labor Day, excuse me. Oh, thank you, yeah. That you can sketch out, I guess. When we had a Mona wind, we had a Mona wind. And you could hear it from way up canyon. And you could hear it back where my house is at the end of Granite Lane. And you knew it was coming. And you knew we'd lose some trees. But by and large, especially early on, before the Forest Service got fussy about cutting big trees, there was a huge copse, a big ponderosa or fir, right where the grocery store is. Big area, and there were half a dozen cabins in there too. And those trees were the buffers of the wind that came off the lake and blew right down the highway. And they'd wave and they'd lose branches and they'd do this, that, and the other thing. Once in a while, one would go over and you'd hear this kind of whomp. And you'd, okay, I heard it, I'm here, still here. But they were a buffer. And then the Forest Service, in its great wisdom, decided that would be a perfect commercial area, so they cut them all down. And I suppose you'd say selectively, but most of them went. They could build more buildings there, more houses. That's where the hotel finally wound up in its present form. And in doing so, they took out those buffer trees so that the next big storm that came through absolutely wiped everything out. Squashed cabins. I think one winter we lost, it was during the winter, we lost 41 cabins. Don't quote me. They can look it up somewhere. Permittees probably could. But they lost a lot of cabins. 41 either destroyed or seriously damaged. And again, it was very much in that track where they'd taken out the buffer trees. I never forgave them for that. Even a kid 15 years old could figure that one out. And anyhow, thereafter we've had more, but not as many. And our storms, I don't believe, at least up until now, have been quite as fierce, because we've had waves so destructive that they turned the boats over at the dock, upside down. Mine broke loose, wound up on top, fortunately, of one of our last big storms, where I believe a half a dozen boats were destroyed totally. And I went down to with my keys, thinking I could unlock the thing. But when you have a powerboat on a short chain bamming with a lock and a heavy chain, and the dock is going up and down. In fact, the dock was, has two sides. It was doing this, like so, warping back and forth. It was worth your life to go out on the walkway and keep your feet. You couldn't. I thought I'd crawl out. I decided I would not. And as a result, a lot of boats got wrecked in that manner. And the dock had to be rebuilt greatly, I believe. It needed a lot of work after that. And it happens. We have these Mona winds. And my guess is, while the ones I remember seem to be a little more raucous than these, the time will come because the heat scale is going up. Not much, just a couple degrees. And look at the color out there. It's going dark on us. Anyhow, I feel the storms will become more bodacious again, just because of the heat level. So, well, I could ramble on, but probably shouldn't. You have some questions?
Yeah. Do you have any winter memories?
Winter?
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, I can't put my finger on it. But we used to ski on the lakeshore in wintertime. I had one of the most fun times. New Year's Eve, we went up with friends and family, stayed overnight. That's tough to do with a wood-burning stove to keep the house warm. And they hotel, the Diamonds put up an old tire thing, gizmo, that would go round and round, and a long rope. And I don't know what the power source was, but they had a rope tow
On the lake.
on the lake, right in front, right where the old diamond dock used to be, you know, right on the corner of the beach where it curves, Hotel Beach, and then the curve to go down was right at that curve. And it went down into the dark. They had one spotlight up at the shoreline, and you skied down till you couldn't see anymore. And then you picked up the rope and dragged yourself up. Nobody to help you load, nothing like that. You were on your own, so make sure all your scarves were tucked in. So it very different, but we survived nicely. And I think now we're not surviving nicely. We've got more things to help us be safe, and we're less safe. And that's partly here. So, anyway, but that was grand fun. We stayed out until midnight. I was wearing my brother's my brother's Harvard sweater, big thick thing, and it was snowing lightly. So I mean, it was just a perfect winter night. And they did that for a couple of years, and then Carl's moved over and had its Carl's Hill. I don't know when that was, but my brother remembers it. And it was quite a steep hill. In fact, once you got going, there was one way you could stop. You'd hit the bottom of the hill and rocket out on, Lodgepole Road, of which there was a large tree. And if you made the tree, you could stop just fine. But in the dark, very different, very different. So, well, it was great fun to have the horses down there. They used to be where the Forest Service is now. That was the horse corral.
Where the
And
ranger station is now.
Pardon?
Where the ranger station is now?
Yeah.
Not
the ranger station, but
Or
the quarters, and
Okay.
their supply chain and such. And you could cross the highway and go down to Strawberry. And you could go up on the ridge. Oh, there were lots of places you could go and do. You could ride horses anywhere. Forest Service did not have gates in those days. Or if they did, they had very few that I recall. Now, I could sneak up on the ridge and get in behind my house, and I had a flat spot for my horse. But I always picked up after him, so. The association did not really want horses around town. And Pinecrest was getting busy then. We're talking about late 40s now, heading to 50s. And there were more people, more cars, more distractions, frights for the horse. You had amateurs riding most of the time. And the cowboys used to go from the lower, it's a hole in there, I referred to right at the end of Pinecrest Avenue, and it does open out onto 108 a little bit. And that pit was a place that they kept all the rental horses. And you could start there and ride off up the Dodge Ridge Road and things like that and stay out of Pinecrest proper, which was fine with everybody. But They didn't want horses around, and with the cars, I can remember the guys would think it was funny, the bunch of girls on the horses, and they go by roaring the horn and scaring them and doing things like that. So it was to be avoided. So.
Yes, I have no idea there were ever horses in Pinecrest ever, but yeah, that must have happened before. They must have really been. They used to have a horse thing down in Strawberry.
Yes, they did, and I rode my horse over the back of Granite Lane and down the other side to the bridge, the wooden bridge, where I could cross easily. And I'd get on the other side. And I did that. And then I rode my horse around the lake.
Around the lake?
But I had to go to the other side because I couldn't do the spillway.
Right, right.
So, and I can remember that cliff. Just as you climb up out of the dam, the cliff is right there. And it sloughs. And it sloughs because it wasn't very wide. And they didn't expect horses.
No.
So I rode, got across the river, and I can remember some of the people saying, "My word, where did you come from?" You know, on this big black horse. And I remember there was a house on the offside close to, I want to say Wilson, I don't think I've got it right. The last house in the first row, South Shore.
Oh, South Shore.
Yeah, right there.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go up and over some rocks, and then you, 2 or 3 doors down, they had a railroad track that they would,
right.
yeah, they'd put in place to load a cart full of stuff to go to the cabin and push it up the hill. They had some kind of a gizmo, which I would say the Forest Service made them take out after a couple of years. But we stepped over the railroad tracks and the whole 9 yards. And then the other thing was the round down where the Kolb's house was, which is halfway from the far point of the houses there to Malm's place, or the old beach as far as you can go in the car, if you remember there. So we walked around the rock
Right.
and came up the beach and continued on.
Well, you got all the way around the whole lake by horse.
By horse, except the portion of
Probably down by the dam.
of the dam itself and the spillway area.
Did you have to backtrack? Did you go all the way down toward Herring Creek and then around? How did you get? But you got all the way around, but you had to just avoid that.
I had to use the bridge.
Oh, the bridge, right?
The bridge was there. Is it still there?
The bridge or the ridge?
The bridge.
Oh, yeah, the bridge is over the. Oh, you mean the lower one below Strawberry?
Yeah.
No, that's gone. No, there's no more bridge crossing, either the Stanislaus or the Herring Creek right now.
Okay.
Yeah, but you could go through the water though, I guess. But yeah, the bridge is out.
Well, I figured it used to be very convenient.
Yeah, I know. I remember there was a bridge that did cross there. Yeah.
A beautiful handmade bridge, and Forest Service has managed to damage the forest considerably as far as usage is concerned. And I don't know what they were thinking, but they had their purpose. So yeah, they have their purpose. And
Okay. Maybe one last question. Do you have any hopes for Pinecrest in the future?
Grimace. Well, if the people who so enjoy it now really love it and gather together, let's say Friends of Pinecrest, to preserve this as a unique experience, unadorned by commercialism. That's the key. Even if it means taking a lot of boats off the lake or putting on floaty things, although God knows there's enough of those. Maintaining it in its simplest form, pine trees and hiking and swimming in the lake, even at night, skinny dipping if you want, picnics on the beach. Get rid of all this fancy crap of entertainment. And yet, I don't understand how we get rid of people who find all their interest in, say, the iPhone, or what is it, the 10, the i10, the fancy one. Marvelous devices, superb things to use, but not there. Because once Pinecrest is gone, it's gone forever, like everything else. I remember going to Yosemite, driving in, getting out, finding a parking place and walking somewhere and hiking somewhere because you could. And if you ruin that with this, I think, false pretense of providing for the public, allowing everybody to come and have a piece of the action, which they should be allowed to do. But I do believe it has to come with limits. And for some people, that means they may not make the limit. They may be left out, and they won't be able to go. The fact is, we're going to have more and more of that in the future, more people left out than included, because there's too many of us and not enough room. I'm waiting for the first person that gets pushed over Yosemite Falls because there's no more room on the rock as they try to get another selfie in there. You know, I mean, it's weird. It's just weird. So good luck and God bless. And that goes for the countryside too, that we can resolve this. But it's going to be Sharesville. And Americans aren't very good at sharing yet. They may learn. We'll see.